Okay, everyone, welcome. It is Monday, April 13th, 2020. This is the Wilmette Park District Regular Meeting Board of Park Commissioners. Due to coronavirus or COVID-19, we are doing this via Zoom. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott.
Here.
Commissioner Murdoch. We should probably unmute Mr. Murdoch for this.
Yeah.
Sorry, bear with us, everybody.
New to all of us. So in the upper right corner of his screen, you should be able to just unmute him real quick.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you have control.
Oh, okay, I have control. Sorry, hold on. Unmute all. I'm going to unmute all for now.
All right, Commissioner Murdoch.
Here.
Commissioner Schisler.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Goebel.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
You have a virtual quorum.
Thank you. First on our agenda this evening is communications and correspondence.
Amy,
there
are
was
you
an
gonna
email
mute
that
us all
came
again?
in, I believe. Yes, I will mute you all again. Sorry. Okay, sorry guys. And then I want to unmute. Okay. Anyway, so there was a communication that came in this afternoon from a gentleman who used to live in Wilmette, but no longer lives in Wilmette. I will read the email so that it can become part of our record here. It says to Steve Wilson, Executive Director, Wilmette Park District, copies to all Park District Board members for consideration at April 13th, 2020 Park Board meeting. Steve and all Park Board members, I have attached just a few photos taken Saturday, April 11th at 3 p.m. at Gilson Lakefront Park and Beach when the weather was not warm, about 55 to 60 degrees. I was curious how the area was being handled. It was disturbing, not only for what it is now, but for what the future portends about. And I saw one face covering. And then the next paragraph, what do you think is going to happen when the temps reach into the 70s and beyond? Perhaps we can agree that a crowd is a problematic entity in the current situation. Dr. Fauci and Birx has said all along that what is needed is 100% compliance, full mitigation. It appears Wilmette is not listening carefully enough. Mitigation policies are in place and I have read them, but as much as they might adhere technically to the current CDC guidelines, they are insufficient. These photos do not present a picture of what the stay-at-home order or the Stop the Spread campaign are supposed to encourage. The Wilmette Park District policy, keeping the parks open, assures that Gilson will continue to be a magnet for such a crowd, not necessarily an individual connected crowds, but a crowd in the aggregate presence. And in doing so, the Wilmette Park District is working against the Stop the Spread effort. That is neither proactive nor, that is neither proactive enough nor smart enough. Without forcefully encouraging full mitigation, the Wilmette Park District becomes part of the problem, not part of the solution. Full mitigation is expected to be difficult. It becomes impossible when the Wilmette Park District fails to encourage it sufficiently. It's no exaggeration to say people may die, indeed, have died because of bad policy. My last point is that during the 30 minutes I was at Gilson, I saw not a single patrol or anyone who looked like they were stationed there to address any crowd. Why not? Where are they? So a group of 4 adults with 5 dogs was permitted to sit at a picnic table together, maskless, for some time before leaving together in a single SUV. That is what you are unwittingly encouraging by failing to close the parks. It is not picnic time. Close the parks, even if only the lakefront, not just some sad bunch of drooping caution tape around 400 square feet of a little playground. Show the rest of the North suburban communities what to do. Close the parks. Get ahead of the spread with more intelligence. Close the parks. Thanks for your attention, Steve Brown, lifelong North Shore resident, former 17-year Wilmette resident. And in close, there's, think about 5, 6, 7 pictures of people that were down, it looks like, walking the beach and then the park during that time. So, Steve, I'm going to let you, hold on a second, sorry, talk about what we're doing to deal with the situation.
Sure. It's actually a part of a much more comprehensive report that I can touch on later, but my thoughts on the email specifically. This, I think, is not an uncommon thought process to those that just look across a 60-acre park and see people. They see a body count and they get concerned. And the reality is, when looking at his pictures, other than the pictures of the individuals with the dogs, which I agree with was not social distancing, the remainder of the pictures actually showed people spread apart, and if they were with someone, it appeared there were family units or couples. So that dovetails with what our experience has been and what the police and fire department's experience has been, is that while we admit that it isn't perfect, that there definitely are times where people are gathering, while we're monitoring, we're addressing it, whether it's us or the police department. And the bottom line is, for the most part, people are doing what they should be doing, and we're staying on it. And we do share in the concerns that the longer this goes and the warmer it gets, the harder it's going to be to manage it. We have other steps that we can take and other pleas to the community we can make. But ultimately, if we do find ourselves in a situation where we don't think it's being adhered to by the vast majority of the people in our parks, we will definitely consider shutting down the parks altogether.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe there are any other communications or correspondence that you received, Steve, prior to this meeting?
Correct.
Okay. All right, hearing no other communications or correspondence, we'll move along to the approval of the voucher list. Oh, wait, sorry, hold on a second before I do that. Commissioner Clark has something to say. Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, I just want to make a point that I received a message today. It was through Facebook, a Facebook message from a friend. Should I give her name or the same question as to whether the park district was going to close the parks? My response was similar, that so far that people have that we are monitoring the parks, and so far people have been maintaining physical distance between each other. And so as long as that continues, we're going to keep the parks open. That's pretty much why I responded.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Anderson, you had your hand up.
Yeah, you need me to do the voucher list.
Yes, please.
Okay, I move to approve the voucher list in the amount of $1,184,000, $323.34, a copy of which is to be attached to and become a permanent part of the minutes of this meeting.
I will second.
Okay, Commissioner Goebel, I believe that was you.
Yes.
Are there any comments or questions on the voucher list? Raise your hand if you have any. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to unmute everybody. Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott.
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch.
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Voucher list is approved.
All right, thank you very much. Hold on a second, I'm just dealing with some, Okay, next up is committee reports. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, none of the committees met since our last board meeting, so that would include the Lakefront Committee, the Parks and Rec Committee, the Golf Operations Committee, and the Financial Planning and Policy Committee. Do any of the commissioners have anything they'd like to add under any of those reports, even though they didn't meet? No hands being raised, so we will move along to our next agenda item, which is unfinished business.
Hold on, Brian is physically raising his hand, not doing it through Zoom.
Sorry, I can't see him, so I don't have it on the thing. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah. Hold on a sec. Sorry, everybody. Trying to deal. Okay, Commissioner Abbott.
Steve, staff did meet with the shoreline erosion consultant, and I'm hoping for an update from him on the lakefront. Other than that, as you say, nothing else has happened.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving along to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before this board? That's not on the agenda. Seeing no one, okay, we'll move along to new business. I will turn this over to Executive Director Wilson, who at this time will be giving us an update on COVID-19. Oh, wait, sorry, I gotta unmute you.
No, I got it. I got it.
Okay, sorry.
All right. So usually I try and get through my report quickly and get it back over to you, but a lot's been going on. I've got a pretty comprehensive list here to go through to kind of explain everything from our closure to the current day, including that meeting Commissioner Abbott mentioned with Shoreline Consultants. So I'm going to touch on all sorts of things. The group that you're seeing here on the screen outside of commissioners is the administration team of the district. They all played a hand in creating this report. They've all been extremely busy in making everything happen since our closure and working with the rest of the staff. So I just want to start by thanking all of them for their help in not only creating this report, but everything over the last couple of weeks. All right, so on to the report itself. We closed at the close of business on March 12th, so effectively come March 13th, we closed all of our facilities and canceled all of our programs in line with the governor's order to shelter in place. We have been doing ongoing communications with the community. Those include March 12th, March 13th, March 19th, March 26th, March 27th, and April 2nd. A lot of it is just trying to get information out there about social distancing, our closures, refunds for lost time in programs and facilities. At that time, we continued paying all part-time and full-time staff. Despite the closure, at the time we were hopeful that it was going to be a shorter than longer closure. Operationally, the recreation and facility staff then began crediting household accounts within our system back for money lost, or I should say time lost within our program, so our customers were made whole. The facility managers and the building staff from West Park began a rotation of all of our facilities with specific checklists to ensure that the facilities weren't incurring any damage or that things that broke were identified as quickly as possible, so we didn't sustain any serious issues at any of our facilities. The bulk of the full-time staff began working remotely as best they could. We put many old laptops back in service after we received parts to make them functional. We purchased more licenses to have more individuals running concurrently off-site but yet connected to our network. So we were getting everyone up and running as best we can. We then added signage the following week to all of our playgrounds to identify that the playground equipment itself was closed in line with the governor's orders, because the governor's order specifically closed playground equipment. And the signage definitely seemed to have a positive effect in reducing the usage. We also at that time, upon closure, took down the nets at the paddle tennis facility, locked the tennis courts a couple days later. And we also had to add signage to the golf course to identify it as closed, similar to the playgrounds. We continue to monitor the use of the parks along with the local police department. Ultimately, we determined on March 23rd that while the signs made a positive inroad, they weren't doing enough. So we took away things like the swings or tied the swings up to make them unusable. We wrapped the equipment in caution tape to reinforce the messaging from the signage. We then, a week later, instituted a rotation of staff that were going around monitoring our parks for gatherings and groups. At that same time, we implemented a rotation of staff at the beach itself. So they didn't rotate between parks, they were at the beach, 2 different shifts across the bulk of the middle part of the day. The weather, to an extent, has cooperated. It hasn't been super wonderful most days, but even on the nice days, our staff, while they were busy and made contact with plenty of people, including groups of teenagers playing sports that resulted in one call to the police department to assist in getting them to disperse. Most people are doing a nice job of social distancing. I also got a call that day from the fire chief who happened to go down there to look, and that was exactly the message that he wanted to convey, was that he was actually very proud of Wilmette and what they were doing and how people were taking the responsibility for their own behavior. So that's good. And then ultimately the governor extended their order to the end of April. That triggered all sorts of further planning that, not necessarily planning, but implementation of plans that we had already been developing along the way. And that entailed the part-time staff being laid off. They were informed on April 3rd that as of April 6th, they would no longer be employees of the Wilmette Park District. This was at the end of the second pay period in which part-time staff were being compensated despite our facilities being closed and our programs being canceled. So I think it's never easy to hear that, but I hope many of the part-time staff felt that we did what we could and kept them on for an entire month longer. But I don't expect everyone to appreciate that fully. So with that being said, to facilitate things as best for the part-time staff, we preemptively pulled a lot of information out of our system to ready Liz in her efforts to respond to unemployment claims, because we wanted to make sure that we were as responsive as possible, in timely of a manner as possible, so that we were not at all holding up people from receiving unemployment benefits. I know we're all seeing in the news all the issues that the county's having, and that they've put in new software, hardware, websites today to try and make that a better system due to the high demand. So hopefully that's going to move along well. We're also putting in place, kind of looking out into the future, the process in which we're going to streamline the hiring of staff back in the event and when we open up, so it's not a laborious process and we're able to get people in working as needed as demand dictates. And then another little side note is we have an employee assistance program by way of our risk management agency, Paderma, that is normally only available to full-time staff as a benefit. And Liz was able to work with Paderma to get it available at a very nominal cost to all of the part-time staff, because we want to try and offer them as much support in any way we possibly can during this obviously stressful time. Turning page, please hold. All right. Also at that time, once the governor extended the order, we decided to cancel the spring session altogether, as the order would have taken us through the midway point of the spring session, and not knowing how quick we're going to get our facilities up and running and how quickly people are going to come back to us, we thought it was prudent to give that certainty to the public. So we canceled through the start of June effectively. The one thing that we made sure we didn't cancel and made sure we communicated to our patrons was that things that are our early childhood programming, preschool, full day preschool, kindergarten enrichment, after school recreation, that is tied to the District 39 calendar. So it's not canceled because we canceled spring session. Those things are on hold because the schools are out. And ultimately, when the schools go back in to session, those programs come back online. So we sent a separate email to all the households that participate in those programs to make sure we're very clear about that. And then we continued again behind the scenes. The staff continued to credit out to everyone's household accounts for the spring session classes that they had signed up for. With that being said, we're still looking out into the future. We're putting various plans together for reopening at various points in time, including summer, and trying to get ready to be as nimble and agile as need be to provide the services as best we can when we reopen in summer, hopefully reopen in summer. In the meantime, we also have been very active on social media, trying to keep people engaged, keep people entertained. We've done all sorts of things. I've got a long list here and I'm going to kind of consolidate it, but I'm also going to make you listen to all of it. We had on March 21st an outdoor scavenger hunt. We had 9 different at-home craft projects that we've done. We've had 6 different at-home workouts we've put up. We've had a weekend of indoor camping. We've had 3 weeks of a different type of activity every day for Bust the Boredom, as it's been branded. On March 31st, we did a Lego stamping art project. And last but not least, this past week and weekend, we did the socially responsible, social distancing neighborhood egg hunt. And it was, I don't know if we want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I'd call it a smashing success. Hundreds of people colored eggs and put it in their windows, submitted to us their addresses where we were able to turn around and create a map, and hundreds more people went out and searched for those eggs in those windows. The feedback we've received through emails, through talking to people on social media has been 100% positive. And so kudos to the recreation staff, the marketing staff, and the IT staff that all kind of got together to make that event happen. Then turning an eye towards the planning that's going on behind the scenes, as far as projects are concerned, and we're going to do a lot more discussion on capital projects later on. But just to let you know what I've been moving forward with is the engineering in and around the stormwater project has continued. They're at the point whereas this morning I got an email seeking a time to have a virtual meeting to talk about fields and irrigation systems with myself and Superintendent Solberg. The engineers also have continued to do their work reviewing the plans and looking at permitting related to the golf cart path project to keep that moving forward, because that planning is not going to go out of date. Once they do it, it's valid. It's going to be useful whether we do the project this year or somewhere in the future. Superintendent Solberg and I met last week with the engineers on the shoreline protection plan. We walked the beach from Langdon to the harbor. We looked at and discussed all the now mostly visible infrastructure that was put in place prior, the stones down at Langdon, the seawall down at Gilson. We discussed our operations. We discussed goals. We discussed do people have an appetite for groins built out into the water or breakwaters out in the water, or what are we trying to maintain? Are we trying to always have beach no matter what the water levels are? And we had a very good conversation. They're working on some things, but I did ask them to not get too far down the road with any of that, because my opinions and my answers to their questions are my opinions and my answers to their question, and that they need to have a similar conversation with the Lakefront Committee, which was the initial plan. So they've got a little bit that they can chew on, but they're not putting plans together and going full board yet, because I asked them to hold off until they could speak with the commissioners. And then the only other plan that I know Commissioner Abbott was interested in is the comprehensive plan at Gilson Park. He and I had talked initially when we were talking about whether committee meetings should continue or not. And we talked a little bit about both the lakefront plans. And at the time I put the comprehensive plan on hold. In subsequent conversations, I think there's been some interest in, okay, let's not put it on hold and let's move it forward. And I've actually spoken with Commissioner Murdoch. There is talk in Washington about another round of stimulus money that could be infrastructure based. And when they did that last in 2008, 2009, the projects that were awarded those monies were the shovel ready projects. Define shovel ready, I asked the engineers to help me get a better definition for that. So there might be a reason, might be a benefit in moving that project forward faster than we originally had planned. And I think it's something that we should all keep in mind as we discuss capital projects as this meeting progresses. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there anyone with any questions for Executive Director Wilson? I see some fingers, but I haven't seen any hands yet. Oh, I see a hand. Hold on, let's see who this is. Commissioner Anderson. Hold on, let me take you off. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. It's a little clunky here. There we go. Okay, Commissioner Anderson.
Okay, Steve, in response to the letter that we got, is it safe to assume that on a nice day, we will have somebody in Gilson Park all of the nice part of the day, and that they'll be able to break up anything that's not appropriate?
We can assure you that as of now, there's a schedule that has people in the park from, I think it's 11 to 3. Emily, nod your head if that's correct. So that's our plan. I think what we learned on the other day is that there might be a benefit to shifting that window back a little bit. The crowds didn't really pick up until a little bit later in the day. So we're evolving, but yes, the plan is to have people there. They wear official Park District clothing. They have an official script on how to approach people, so they're doing it in a proper way. And They also are equipped with the non-emergency police number if people do not respond to them. And like I said, on the other nice day, we had a group of teens playing ball up in the main part of the park. And they left the first 2 times they were approached. On the 3rd time, they basically said, just call the cops on us. And so she did. And the police showed up and explained to the teenagers that they weren't to be there, and then they left. So, so far the process has been working, and yes, your assumptions are generally true. But we also are going to read and react as the situation dictates, and we might put in other measures. There are other steps that we could take to try and deter and corral some of the behavior, but at this point, we're being effective with what we're doing, we believe.
I can just tell you, I was there when I've been walking in the park, and I've been doing it pretty much every day up until a few days ago. It's always after 3 o'clock, and it's still pretty busy.
Okay.
And you know, I have seen one of our people go through, I think a Prius maybe. Is that the car they have?
It's a C-Max.
Yeah, C-Max, yeah, one of the energy efficient cars. And then the police were there as well at the same time, believe it or not. So, you know, I was feeling pretty good that we had a lot of monitoring going on. Mm-hmm. But I would say there's still a lot of activity at 5:30
okay.
when we're down there.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schisler has his hand raised as well, so I will.
I was going to say, so 4 people have reached out to me. When it was at 3, I gave Director Wilson a call and just said, hey, you know, people are expressing concern. But I think that's just that. I think it's just concern, because it is a worry that people aren't socially distancing. But it's not like it's not being addressed. I too have been at Gilson fairly frequently. I spent probably 3 hours there flying kites on Saturday, and no issue as far as, you know, people. And I too saw the police through there probably at least 2 or 3 times in the time that I was there. So I feel like people are taking it responsibly. I think there is concern. I think it could easily go sideways, but at this point, I have not seen it.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any questions for Director Wilson? Sorry.
Commissioner Abbott does.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Commissioner
Abbott?
Sure. First off, I think staff's doing a terrific job of making the right calls. A couple of things only. Obviously, particularly Gilson should be, you know, passive only, no picnics, no ball playing, basically no sports would be a suggestion. The second thing is perhaps, and this is a suggestion, that particularly on nice days, that we ask patrons to limit their time to, let's say, an hour. And I don't know how easy that is to implement. So just those are suggestions, and that's all I've got.
Thank you. Commissioner Goebel has her hand raised as well.
Great, thank you. I have also spent quite a bit of time in our parks recently. Like a lot of us, we're all eager to stretch our legs a bit. Majority of the people that I see are doing the right thing. There is occasionally someone who is not, but I think for the most part, our visitors are doing the right types of behavior we would hope to see. I saw a group of teenagers sitting in their cars in parking spaces, which I thought was pretty strategic on their parts to be a parking space apart. And I think they've been there regularly as far as I can tell. So, appreciate the insight on what the staff plan is and how we're going to work with Wilmette Police Department to make sure that everyone stays safe. To a certain extent, unfortunately, we will always have a few people who are consider themselves exceptions to the rule. And then the second comment I wanted to make is I think the staff and the team behind social media and programming has just been doing a fabulous job. A friend spoke to me and said, I think the Park District has an opportunity to lead. This was back when we first began seeing what would occur, and I think that is exactly what's been happening, whether it's in-home activity or things like the egg hunt, which was particularly well done. To see that kind of engagement is very exciting. So I want to thank everyone for their work on that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we will move up to our next agenda item, which is a board discussion. And the first item under that is the financial operating impact of COVID-19. Executive Director Wilson has shared with us a list of the capital projects that we had approved for this year, what's been completed, and then what the staff is recommending for possibly completing, and then also for deferring to future year or years. So I'll let you speak on that as well, Director Wilson.
Okay, President Wolf, if you could do me a favor, could you give me back control of the meeting?
Yep.
That way I'll be able to share out my screens a little bit better.
If I knew how to do that.
Go to participants.
Yep, got it.
And next to my name, click more, and then say make host.
Okay, next to your name, click more. Okay, let's see. I apologize, this is our first time doing this. Nope. Let's see. Okay, hold on once again. Make host, there you go. Okay, you're up.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I want to start by sharing out the overall slimmed down financial model. This is a tool that is not unfamiliar to the commissioners, as we used it throughout the years, and most recently used it at the committee of the whole meeting where we discussed capital projects last. And since we're discussing capital projects again, we decided to bring this back out. It is a little bit consolidated. We don't have the individual revenue line items or expense line items. So at the top, starting in the first, in column B, you have the beginning fund balance that we started 2019 with, and then the results. And you can see we ended in a fund balance of 6.3 versus our target fund balance of $4 million, leaving us in excess of $2.3 million over our fund balance. This was a combination of operations, but also our capital projects in 2019 not being fully expended as compared to budget. So that fund balance rotates up to the top of the 2020 column C. And then you can see our budget in here, our total operating revenue, our total operating expenses, and a net operating surplus of $4.7 million. What I've inserted now in here, which is new in rows 14 through 16, are different line items for the impact that the pandemic has had on our operations by way of closure and canceled programming. So the spring session, these are estimates to be, totally straightforward, but spring is estimated at about a $770,000 bottom line impact. And then the summer was estimated to be a $3 million impact if we lost summer in its entirety. And I'm going to switch over screens real quick to show how we got there. This is the pool's operating budget, net $292,000. The lakefront's operating budget, which is a net of $700,000. The golf course, which isn't as short a season necessarily as pool or lakefront, but the golf course full budget operating net is $135,000. And then this is going through and finding camps that aren't already included in pool, lakefront, and golf. That adds another $1.6 million to the bottom line on the operating level to get to about a 2.7 number. So using 3 million as that number of what if we lose summer would do to us, plus the 700. So you could see I split the 3 million into two halves. Your adjusted operating surplus drops from 4.7 million down to 963,000. Your capital expense as budgeted. We did an exercise that you all have in your hands, and I can flip to at some point, where Superintendent Solberg, Superintendent Gwynn, and myself went through and created a list. That was about 3 weeks ago when we created that list that allows for us to defer some capital to manage our finances. That's where that number comes from. This number is probably going to change based on this discussion here tonight. Then you can see our debt-related information and the new impact to the bottom line, managing and at least looking at everything against our target fund balance, and then everything rolls forward into the future. So before I go on, I can see that Commissioner Anderson has his hand raised. Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
as you would expect, right? In looking at the pieces that you showed as your second slide, there's $7 million of revenue that's gone, but I think your assumption is that all of the expenses go away as well. So my question goes around to the nature of the expenses that are in there. Are they all variable, or are they somewhat fixed in the sense that there are salaried people who aren't projected to be furloughed, or if we had to miss the whole summer? Because otherwise I'm starting at 7 million as the shortfall until we figure out what the cost savings are that go along with it.
Sure. So yes, there are some fixed costs in there. The salaries for those operations. So take the pool. There's very little full-time salary that gets allocated to the pool, but there's some. And then it's an even smaller amount that gets allocated across those summer months. So yes, there are some salaries in there. There are some utilities in there, which is why I took the 2.7 number and boosted it up to $3 million, is because there are some costs that we're going to incur just to keep the facilities up and running. And if we are paying full-time staff, there will be some costs, but a lot of those costs are going to be variable, especially on the camp side. 100% of those costs can be variable. All right. Any other questions? Just scrolling through to see if anyone's hand's up. Oh, Commissioner Anderson again. All right.
Four.
Okay, go ahead, Gordon.
I'm sorry, this isn't a capital question. I should have asked it earlier, but it's about July 4th. Is there a sort of a drop dead date by which we're fully committed to spending all the money? Or is there a point in time where we have to make a go, no-go decision that's in advance of it that we have to be careful of?
There is not a specific go, no-go date, but I do think that is something that we will want to make a decision on, prior to the start of May or even mid-May. The only thing that really we have any sort of contract on is the actual fireworks themselves. So, but that company has worked with us throughout the years on a lot of things, so I don't expect that to become problematic. We're not going to be on the hook for anything, but we'll confirm that with them. But the rest of it is our purchasing of supplies, staff costs, staff time to put things up, getting vendors in place, hiring the entertainers, and we haven't begun that process yet. So we're not at risk at this point.
Okay.
President Wolf?
I think you muted me. Okay. I had a question about our debt service. Is there any way to refinance our debt service during this to get more favorable rates where we're saving some money there?
So that's a good question, and I can ask it. I know that you'll recall maybe 6 months ago, we had our financial advisors at a meeting explaining we had one issuance out there where there was an opportunity to refinance it. And that the rates were moving somewhat favorably, but then the rates moved away from us and we put it on hold. I know they're continually monitoring that because they've checked in with me a couple times since then. And I did have a little bit of a back and forth with them today on a conversation that Commissioner Murdoch and I had. And rates have been extremely variable because the markets have been extremely volatile. And but they're starting to see some stabilization taking place over the last couple of days, and the rates are pretty low. So I will ask that question as well.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Goebel, I believe you had your hand up at one point.
I did. Yeah, Steve, would you is this a part of the conversation where we should talk about the target fund balance and where you would seek some guidance, or should we return to that as we go on?
Yeah, that is definitely my goal for this meeting, is to get that guidance from this group. So at some point, we for sure should be talking about that. I wanted to get any questions about the model itself out of the way before we turn to that discussion. So definitely, that's the goal.
Okay. And then just a follow-up question to tail off of Commissioner Anderson's. Is there a drop dead date for camps, whether it's session 1 or session 2, in which you would need to plan, ramp up hiring and so forth, or notify those you've hired, for example?
Yeah, we haven't established a firm date, but there is definitely a multi-week process of getting people hired and trained and in the right places.
Sure.
That's
Sure.
going to have to take place. So it's not like we can decide on June 8th to have camp start on June 13th. So we're going to have to make
Certainly.
that decision closer to the start of May than anything. And so we're, you're seeing in the media, are we at the peak today, or are we a couple days away from it? Things are starting to go in the right direction. Hopefully over the next couple days to week, we're going to get a little bit better understanding that's going to help kind of coalesce all this optional planning that we've been doing.
Every day will help clarify. Okay, those were my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Abbott.
Yes, this is really helpful. This modeling, the $500,000, $1.5 million and the $1.5 million, basically $3 million, because the spring is already gone. With regard to the summer, that potential loss if we lose the entire summer, how do you feel about your calculations for that number? Could it be, is it variable? Could it be 4? Could it be 2? Or do you think it's more like, more like plus or minus $500,000? How do you feel about that number? You were making your best guesses here.
Yeah, and it's not kind of as Gordon pointed out, this isn't the most exact calculation. It's somewhat of a rough estimate.
Sure.
So I feel like it's in the ballpark, but there's definitely going to be variability. I think 500,000 is reasonable, but I'm not going to stake my life on it either.
No, but that's helpful in terms of looking down at the bottom. If this number is jumping $500,000 versus $1 million potentially. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions before we kind of pivot the conversation to what our target is from a bottom line fund balance at the end of 2020? That is what I'm seeking from the commissioners, so I can then manage the details to get there. And I would like us to have that conversation before we dive into the capital discussion, because then that will kind of set the mindset around how much should be deferred, I think, for some people. So before we get there, though, I see some hands going up. I'm going to go to President Wolf first.
Steve, could you just give us a little background as to how we got to that $4 million target fund balance kind of across the board? Because it's been different values over the years since I've been on the board, and it's affected ratings and things like that. So if you could give everybody just a little history, I think that might be helpful in our thought process.
Sure. We in the past had an unofficial fund balance policy that was pretty uniform across most park districts, where you targeted 25% of your total operating budget as your fund balance. The time that we looked at it most closely was when we had close to $9 million in total fund balance. We had some facility needs. We were discussing paddle tennis, the golf course renovation, Centennial ice rinks, mechanical renovation, and things like that were all larger, and trying to decide whether we had the capacity to do that kind of work out of our reserves or not. And we took a good hard look and kind of tried to break out of the the mold of how people have set fund balances of just a pure 25% of your operating, and looked at why it was 25% historically. And it was because if property taxes were delayed either in people paying them or the county remitting them, that was kind of your ability to sustain yourself for a quarter, because historically there had not been a delay longer than that. And then we started looking at it on a fund by fund basis. And really the thought process became, in certain funds like our audit fund, our Social Security fund, those are taxed for specifically and funded specifically by a tax levy. So those funds remained at 25%. Where we made a departure from the 25% was within the recreation fund. And you've all heard me say this before, but the way we're funded is unique even within the world of Parks and Rec, where about 70%, depending on our debt service in a year, about 70% of our revenue comes in by way of user fees, membership fees, rentals of our facilities, things like that. And when we really looked at how we were allocating our tax levy, we were allocating virtually almost nothing, a couple $100,000 into the recreation fund. So to have a 25% threshold for delayed taxes didn't necessarily make sense, considering that isn't how our cash flow comes to us. And so ultimately we reduced our requirement within the recreation fund a little bit because we were constantly funded by user fees. Of course, we find ourselves here today in a full shutdown during a global pandemic, the obvious exception to the rule. But that was how we got to that. And then we looked at our budget, we did the calculations on a fund by fund basis, and it aggregated to about $4 million. So we set that as the target.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Anderson.
Well, Steve, you hit on what I was going to say right at the end of what you just said there. The whole concept of building the fund balance relative to the tax revenues, which now are very much looking like they're the very solid piece of our financial structure, and the fees, and this is the first time we've probably ever looked at it this way, are not. And those are, to your point, 70% of our revenues. So you asked a question earlier about, what do we want our fund balance to be? And I think that's the wrong question right now, because whatever we want it to be sort of forces what the spending is for over a period of time. And we don't know what is going to happen in the next 6 months. And, I'm of the opinion at this point that, we don't spend anything on capital that isn't, something we've already committed to, or something that protects our assets, or something with a really quick payback. And whatever that balance is, we don't know what our revenue piece of our picture is for the next 6 months. So trying to estimate what a fund balance is based on revenue numbers that are still, I think, up in the air. And I tend to be a pretty conservative guy. But I've been wrong all along personally about how deep this coronavirus is affecting everything. And I think at this point, I would be really reticent to assume things are going to get better, even in, things may get better over the summer and then go bad again in the fall. We don't know. So I wouldn't be spending any money we don't have to. The other side of that is I would do all the planning and do all the legwork and get all the quotes and do all the stuff you can before you spend it. Take it right up to the point where you are ready to spend it, and then just stop. And then we can assess later. Because I think we can't pull back money we spent if we end up needing it. But we certainly, if we're in a position where we've deferred spend, we didn't have to, that's not the end of the world. That's, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair argument, fair point, and that's why they call this the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. You guys are setting the guidance, and I'm trying to put things on the table to spark discussion. So thank you. Commissioner Murdoch, you were next, I believe.
Thank you. Gordon, you raised some great points. I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about sort of the historical process and how we arrived where we did. I was involved in that process last time around. I think there were two other pieces to it, Steve, going back. One was at the time we were trying to improve our bond rating. And so we were trying to get feedback from the rating agencies, but it was our general sense that we were probably overfunded, even though they argued that we were underfunded compared to other park districts. So one of the things we did is we went through a number of different sensitivities about what might happen in a recession, in some trying times, whatever. Obviously never contemplating a situation like we're in right now. But what we found in the last recession, which as we know was very deep and very difficult, is our revenues really held up well. And where they eroded somewhat, we were able to make corresponding cuts on the expense side. So we didn't really see our net decline in, recessionary times as you would normally expect, which again allowed us to kind of arrive at that $4 million fund balance.
All very true. And actually, in my communications with some of our surrounding Park District neighbors, that exact mindset of, remember the last recession, we actually didn't get as impacted because people opted out of their country clubs into our golf courses and tennis facilities. They opted out of away camp and into our summer camps and at our beaches and pools. And so we were somewhat insulated. That was a purely financial recession. This is obviously a much different thing. So only time will tell if that holds true, but that is all very, very true. Commissioner Schisler, you are next with your hand up.
I don't know if I am comfortable setting a target at $4 million or some other number. Every other model we've ever had has kind of gone out the window with the current circumstances. And I kind of want to see where we end up with things based on what we want to cut. And maybe we need to do deeper cuts, but I don't know if we can set there might be certain things we need to spend money on. And I think it's kind of the cart before the horse in some ways to say we have to reach this number.
Fair enough. Thank you. Commissioner Abbott.
I just want to say I agree with what Gordon was saying and what Commissioner Schisler was saying. This is a new territory, never contemplated. So it's not just a recession, but we got our revenues just yanked out from underneath us, and we don't know when they're coming back. So it's hard to establish a fund balance because that was based on assumptions that we never contemplated before. So yeah, I want to, like Gordon was saying, and Todd was saying, I just want to save whatever we can and try to limp out of this in the best shape we can, and see where that goes. Obviously, we're going to go through this list, and we'll go through them one at a time, and each of us will provide our input on that particular item. But yeah, I'm not comfortable with setting a 4 million or 5 million. Let's just try to save all the money we can. That's my goal.
All right, thank you. Well then, without further ado, let's dive into the capital projects list. I'll share that out to all of you now. So you should now see on your screen the capital project list, again, as created back about 3 weeks ago. The columns F and on were the new columns where we put a different status on things. So this first grouping of projects marked complete. They're not necessarily complete, but they were all ordered. So we're obligated to them at this point. So that's why they're marked the way they are. Then you can see this next section of complete, or of keep, I should say. And I think we should go through these line item by line item. And you're gonna have to bear with me as you guys are putting your hands up, because when I go to share screen, I only can see 6 screens on my screen. So I'll try and get to you. I'll have to page through. So first 2 items, let's, while we're saying we're going to do them line by line, they kind of work in concert together. This is our IT budget of hardware and software. I spoke with our IT person today about these items, knowing that there's a little bit of a need more so now for technology, so we can continue to do things virtually and remotely. And I asked them specifically about how much of this budget is on larger projects that we could do without within 2020 and push off into future years. And he identified about $30,000 to $35,000 worth of money for me out of these. So while we have it listed as keep, I think it's safe to say about 50% of that we could easily defer into a future year. President Wolf.
Sorry, to go back to the things that have already been completed, I had a question. Have those all been paid out, or are they contracts that we've signed?
Not everything's been paid out. So you can see these ones here. Those were that's the equipment we received last year. So that's just the second year of the lease payments. So
okay.
Those we have contracts on, we've received And I think we've received some of these and others have been ordered.
Okay, so my question is, the things that are still yet to be fully paid out, is there any way to renegotiate any of those leases or any kind of purchase orders or anything like that where we could find any money savings?
Yeah, in theory, we can definitely ask.
Okay, given the times that we're in, I know that, you know,
Yeah.
it's a fluid situation. It might be able to find some cost savings there.
Yep, for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Anderson?
Steve, rather than look at things that can get deferred to next year, you know, what are the things that can't be deferred even 3 months? You know, and I would think that computer hardware and software, you could live 3 more months with what you got. I mean, what is it in this list that we really have to spend in the next 2 or 3 months?
The 100% honest answer is nothing.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm going. You know, I unless there's a really, really good reason that it has to get spent this month or next month or the following month, I would sit on it until we know more. We're in such a period of, I mean, you put this list together with the team, and it, you know, it's a lengthy list. You know, not even a month ago, and I bet you if you did it again today, it would be different.
Oh, for sure, for sure. When I walked through it earlier today with Commissioner Murdoch, I found myself having different opinions about many of these projects. So
yeah,
100% honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the only other, you know, the things that I see in here that, you know, are more time sensitive are things like a sailing boat racks, you know, for the sailing beach, things like that, that are directly related to a seasonal operation that if I was looking for things, you know, that's a smaller number. That's just the material cost. Our staff is actually already working on all of that. So that one's almost more moved into the pending or started column, if you will, even though we don't have one of those on here yet. You know, so, but we've already begun the roof replacement work at the Community Recreation Center on Building B. That's ongoing currently. The roof work at Centennial is, I spoke with Superintendent Solberg today via email, and she informed me that we are experiencing some leaking back in the area of the ice rink where we house the Zamboni and have some of our equipment. So that is sooner than later, but if you want in the next 3 months, that one doesn't have to be done in the next 3 months either.
Yeah, my personal feeling is, and you know, there's 6 other commissioners obviously, is that if we don't have to spend it and we're not going to be stupid by not spending it, then I would just wait. We got another meeting next month. We can look at it again then.
Yeah, and I don't think we were pretending that we were going to spend any of this in the next 3 months. You know, this is looked at on an annual basis, and you know, further down the list, the possible numbers are even more likely to, you know, wait until the end of the year and things like that. So there's definitely flexibility in the timing on execution of a lot of these things.
All right, but there are some things I'm guessing that you would come to us and say, we need to do this right now. We can't put it off another month or 2.
Yeah, and we've already begun those projects. That's why we're still working on the shoreline project. That's why the roofing project at the recreation center is ongoing. Things like that. We have definitely moved those projects forward.
Okay, all right, good.
Commissioner Murdoch.
So it sounds like there are a couple of other items. When I first put my hand up, I wanted to ask about Building B. As you mentioned, that's already in the works, so that's committed. But it does seem to me if we have an active leak at Centennial, we should be doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's a minor number, but it looked like Maple Park, the tennis and basketball court, were in really bad shape. The other one certainly seemed like you could go a little bit further. But so are you saying that even on the keep items, you're not planning on doing anything other than what's already been started? I want to make sure I understand what you said. And then along those lines, if our focus primarily is on really the next month or 2, and we'll go back and revisit, isn't everything below that line, whatever it possible, we aren't really making decisions to say we're absolutely not going to do a certain project this year until we know more and until we revisit it in the next couple of months. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, both about the key projects and then the rest of the list.
Sure. I haven't approached this list using the mindset that Commissioner Anderson laid out there. So I don't want to just say it as a blanket comment without looking at it and getting input from the department heads. But at the same time, I think there is a lot that, you know, you can go down this list, chlorine controllers, diving well covers, pool vacuums. These things are related to a seasonal facility. And I don't know if I would necessarily charge forward on those things next week. We would wait on those. Would I wait 3 months? I don't know. It depends on how quickly we're going to be opening our facilities and whether these things help in that reopening and help in keeping the facility up and running and safe for our patrons. So I don't want to necessarily, without spending some time, commit to all or nothing at this point in the conversation. Commissioner Clark.
Hi, yes, in some ways I'm going to be perhaps repeating some of what has been said before, but I guess my question, and I understand that some of this you will not be, you're not talking about starting it in the next few weeks, but even with these, I guess part of my question is, what led you to create these, you know, what was behind putting some items into the keep category, some items into a possible category, and some items into deferred category? I mean, I know this was done a couple of weeks ago and might be done different now, but what was your thinking that created these different categories, and, you know, that certain items went into each category?
Sure. A lot of the undertone to a lot of these is, you know, making sure your facilities don't get too negatively impacted when you look at things like roofing projects, that
Mm-hmm.
taking care of your base infrastructure maintenance needs. And then some of the other items are really related to potential safety. You know, chlorine controllers to keep your pool water clean and proper for people when they're in your water. Things like tennis court resurfacing. The courts are cracking and we don't want there to be any trip hazard. So we want to address it before it becomes unsafe, things like that. But the reality is, if you're going to have a closure for an extended period of time, you're still not going to have people in those facilities or on those tennis courts. So you could be flexible in the execution of those projects.
Okay. I mean, I out of the items that you have, at least in the keep category, I mean, I suppose I'm a little bit more like leaned toward, well, on the computer equipment and computer software, because some software does become out of date and that you don't have that as much choice, that you do need to update it and to spend money. And is that any of that the case within your things? I mean, even equipment can, you know, become non-functional and need to be replaced. And are you at that situation yet with any of these items?
And that's why we're talking about only, you know, really needing about half of this budget, you know, because the rest of it is towards, you know, enhancements and build outs of data storage and backups. And we're scheduled to do a telephone project in conjunction with the village this year, because we share a telephone system with them. So that is probably something that I don't think the village or us are going to pursue. I haven't had that conversation specifically. So there's some flexibility within those line items.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, because I guess I'm saying then that least, I mean, you know, we are talking about, well, Commissioner Anderson has talked about like not spending at all for 3 months, but you may not. I mean, there are certain items that you have in that category that you cannot really wait on for 3 months. There's certain software that has to be updated, and so anyway, that's just my feeling on that. So
okay. Thank you. Commissioner Abbott, I believe I saw your hand up at one point.
Yeah, but I'm just anxious to let's just get to the individual line items, because that's really where it's going to happen. So I withdraw my question.
Okay, I have 3 other people with their hands up, so we'll go through them first.
Okay.
Commissioner Schisler?
I was going to basically say the same thing as Brian, that some of these things, it's just an item by item basis for me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Anderson?
I just wanted to let Commissioner Clark know I'm not advocating not looking at things for another couple, 3 months. I think we should look at them every month. If we decide not to spend it this, we should look at it next month and revisit that. So just look at it as 1 month windows, not 2 or 3 month windows.
Okay. That's
Thank
fair.
you. President Wolf?
I just wanted to reiterate the comment that I believe that we should be looking at things that obviously, as you mentioned, would have any kind of safety issues in any of our facilities or parks. Those would need to be addressed. And then my other concern is that we are looking at items that would need to be completed if we were to start running our whole program line and everything tomorrow. Like what needs to be done to get us up and ready and running if we were to reopen next week. So I just want to make sure we're keeping those 2 things in our mind as we're going through these.
Great, thank you. All right, so I will return to the list and we'll continue down line item by line item. Moving on to chlorine controllers at the pool. These are the part of the equipment behind the scenes that monitors and puts chlorine into the water to maintain the water quality. I specifically asked the question today of Superintendent Gwynn about how dire our situation is with these. These are critical pieces of equipment for the cleanliness of the water. We have been fixing and repairing these as they go bad for a year or 2 now anyway. So kind of in the mindset that Commissioner Anderson laid out, if you're trying to find areas where you don't have to spend, while these are critical pieces of equipment, for another year, we can continue to fix and repair as we go on. Any thoughts, questions on that? Otherwise, I would recommend we move it from keep and move it out into a further out thought process, if not fully deferred, at least down into the possible area. All right, seeing no one who's looking to say anything.
I raised my hand.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
I suppose my other question is, when do we have to make that decision by? I mean, is there a lead time to order these things? And I think that's the case for all of the pool items. I think, do we have is there a lead time that has to be ordered by a certain time to be able to get it in and working?
That's a really good question, and I don't have the answer to that. So I'm looking at Superintendent Gwynn, if she knows or not. Nope. You don't know?
Not an exact timeline, no. I can get that and circle back with you all, but no.
Okay, so for now, we're going to just hold off on that one until we know more. All right, moving down, diving well cover. This is an item that was added because the cover that we use is, oh, wait, hold on. Commissioner Murdoch, your hand up on the previous item?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that this, my understanding, is a safety issue on this diving well cover.
Correct. So this is an item that we use in the off season to cover the diving well. As you know, the diving well is 15 feet deep. It is not proper to, in the off season, drain it completely. You're supposed to keep about half the water in it to prevent the concrete around it from heaving and moving too much. So the water in there is a good thing. But since you now have over 7 feet of water in there, we put a heavy duty cover over the top that prevents anyone from being able to get in or fall into it. That cover has now experienced a rip. It's currently on there with a rip for this off season, but we would like to get it replaced going into the next off season, so we do no longer have a ripped cover that's there intended to keep people safe. It isn't fully damaged by any means, but we don't want anyone to go on there, make the rip worse, and then have something that truly does become a safety issue. So I would be inclined to keep this, but it has always been intended to be a year-end purchase anyway, or at least the year end of the pool season, so fall time frame. So I would like to keep it in the keep column, but obviously not execute on it in the next 3 months by any means. Just scrolling through to see if anyone has their hand up. I see none, so I'm going to move on to the next item. Pool vacuums. Pool vacuums are just kind of the workhorse on a daily basis to keep the water clean and get things off the bottom of the pools. We do have some that are in fair condition, but not wonderful. And when they break, obviously, in particular, our lap swimmers notice the quality of the water in the main pool. So I would advocate for getting these in the event that we think we're going to be reopening, and when they arrive, they arrive. I'm not worried about lead times on this one because we do have some that are operational, but if we end up opening the pool when we have a date on opening the pool, then I would suggest we move forward on these. Scrolling through to see if I have hands. Seeing, oh, I think I saw one pop up. Oh, our resident lap swimmer, Commissioner Clark.
Yeah. No, I guess my only comment too is with there isn't a lead time in this, and if we are reopen the pool, we'll have in a sense, the price will be offset by the fees that we'd be getting from the pool anyway. So it doesn't seem to be as much of an issue as some of the other items. So yeah, I'm fine with just waiting and see if we need them.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Anderson, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't get confused with our definitions of what, what I'm hearing is that in my mind, these things we're talking about are really going to be deferred at least a month, right? So they're, in my mind, they're deferred, and then we would look at them again next month and decide whether to move ahead, especially if we think we're going to open the pool, that we're going to move ahead with them. But I don't want to confuse deferred and keep. Keep to me is something that we want to do right now, and if we're going to wait another month to make a decision, that's really deferred. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. What I would say is when this was created, it was within the fiscal year, within this calendar year. So when we say keep, it's still a viable project. It isn't necessarily currently in the works. Deferred is it's not something we're even going to consider trying to move forward this year. And so I agree with you that anything that we're marking as keep or leaving as marked as keep here, I can rework this and move it to a deferred, temporarily deferred status or something like that, because I agree with you. We should be talking about this and looking at these things on a pretty regular basis. I don't want this to be a one-time conversation and we'll see you come budget time. I think this is important that we're looking at it all on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah. So really a keep then is two columns. One is we're going to work on it tomorrow because we need to do it, like the roof. And then there's the other ones like the pool stuff where we want to do it this year, but we're not going to commit to it for at least for another month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Good.
All right. Sounds good. Moving on to the next line item, parking lot lighting replacement. This is replacing the light fixtures within the parking lot at Centennial, moving them to a LED system. There is a savings there. Something that I noticed going through it today is that we split the money between the ice and the tennis facility. So down in Possible, we have the other half of that. So it's really a $60,000 project, not a $30,000 project. But the reality is We also seek and receive often grant money that offsets the cost that we spend. And there is a return on investment here as far as electric consumption is concerned, which is why we're keeping this one in, or why we kept this one in initially. It's not necessarily a safety issue here. This is, I think Commissioner Anderson said it earlier, something that has a clear return on investment. And so once you spend the money, take in the grant money from Commonwealth Edison, and then start saving on the electric, it has a pretty quick return of a couple years, I believe. So Commissioner Murdoch, I believe your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to pick up on what Gordon was saying a couple of minutes ago. Gordon, I understand that you're trying to focus on just what's going to happen between now and the next meeting, but on something like this, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we need to give you some guidance about projects that we think there's a likelihood that we're going to do, so that you and the staff can do your planning, so you can do your work, as opposed to going through this each month and saying, now you can start on this one, now you can start on this one. For a lot of these conversations, I think a lot of the conversation is going to focus on the planning piece of it as opposed to the expenditure. And when do you need to start doing some of that planning if we're going to continue these projects at some point in the future? I think I would like some guidance on that.
Yeah, and specifically to lighting, I don't know the exact planning lead time we need on it. I know we use outside source that often is able to make that planning time pretty quick, because they're the experts. They're the ones who can spec out the fixtures for us. They have the process of applying for the grants. As a well-oiled machine, and it gets turned around pretty quickly. So, the timing of when we were going to do this work obviously would be either now, before the pool season would have opened, or it would have been after the pool season. So we could easily say that this becomes a fall sort of concept, whether we're going to execute on it or not, and then decide in a month or two what that planning looks like and when we have to execute it. So we don't necessarily have to decide it tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes, well, especially for the lighting, because you say there is a cost savings. If we're putting it off to the fall, that's just spending more money on electricity that, it's savings. So savings that we don't have. Whereas if we were to do that sooner than later, we are starting the savings at an earlier rate. Otherwise, we're talking about May, June, July, August, September, potentially, without having the electricity savings. So, I mean, of all the things, since there isn't I tend to put that more in a higher category, like the roof replacement, whereas by, yes, you can put it off, but by putting it off, you to use a cliche, one stitch becomes 9 or something, that you're not savings, or you're ending up spending more than you'd be saving. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a very good comment, but right. Yeah. A stitch in time saves 9 is what I was trying to just say. I was trying to make it.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else on this topic? Commissioner Abbott?
Yes, you just commented on a 2-year return on investment. I'm so concerned about the financials. I would say, and I don't have a strong opinion about this one, I could be convinced either way, but 2 years would have to be the maximum. 2 years or better return on investment is what I'd be looking for right now, until such time as we understand where these numbers are, where our financial situation is. So I could go either way on this one, but if somebody said 3 years, I'd say no, defer. So that's all. I just want to let you know where my level of pain is, and it's got to be a quick return.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schisler?
I agree with Commissioner Clark on this, that the longer we wait, the greater or the less savings that we would achieve on that. So I think there's some advantages for moving sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Murdoch again?
I also agree.
Okay. All right, so it looks like I have 3 people who are inclined to move sooner than later. Commissioner Anderson, you were the one who said, hold off on as much as possible. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what are your thoughts on this one?
Again, $60,000 is a big enough amount of money that I care. And I think at $60,000 of cash that's going out, I don't know how quickly the grants come in and how big they are relative to the 60,000 going out. But I would not feel comfortable spending 60,000, knowing even, I mean, in any other circumstances, I would say it's a no-brainer. You just go ahead and do it as quick as you can, just like everybody else is saying. But at this point in time, we're trying to conserve cash going out the door. And even though this is a good investment in a standalone kind of situation, we're in a situation where we don't know if we're going to need that 60,000 for something else in the next 3 months or 4 months, and getting the pay back over 2 years. At that point, it's really not relevant.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not seeing any other hands up, and we seem to have a little bit of a divide on this topic. So we're going to just leave it on this list, but not pull the trigger on it this month. Is everybody okay with that approach in the very short term? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on, Gilson, we've already talked about the 2 roofing projects. They're both, one is actively being worked on, and the other one is at Centennial. We do have an active leak there, so I think Commissioner Murdoch said it earlier, and I agree that we should not wait on this one. We should move this project forward sooner than later. Anyone with thoughts on that? I got a thumbs up from President Wolf and Brian. All right, moving on. Lakefront infrastructure. As I mentioned in my report, we've already begun this process. I think we all agree that protecting our shoreline, both at Langdon and at Gilson, is a high priority for the community. And while it's definitely going to cost some money to do this analysis and report, I don't think anyone's looking to gamble with our shoreline. So I would recommend we continue moving this forward in the near term. Commissioner Murdoch, I believe your hand is up.
Yeah, just going back to Gordon's comment, though, I mean, obviously we're not committed to spending $300,000 in the next month. You're going to continue to do the planning. Whatever costs are associated with doing that planning, we're going to spend that money. And then once we have that information, we'll have another conversation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Commissioner Schisler?
And that the lakefront infrastructure is different than the shoreline protection, or the same thing? Because later on there's shoreline protection.
Oh, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for calling that to my attention. I misspoke. So lakefront infrastructure here is actual money to towards the comprehensive plan. This is not the shoreline. I'm sorry. So I got that backwards in my head. This is
so if that's the case, I'd totally love to defer this. But I agree with you with the lakefront shoreline protection, that is imperative that we get on that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Abbott?
Yeah, well, so if we moved ahead with this, we would move ahead with the master plan, which is, let's just assume less than 100,000, not the 300,000. I have to admit that I can see both sides here. It might be good to get a few months behind us, but at some point we have to, quickly we're going to be in front of the public, and I'm not sure how that's going to work. We could only we could steal a march of a few months maybe at most on this, but it's not going to be 300,000. That would be an authorization later on. I can't see us doing any work this year. It's going to be 100. Let's just say 100. So I don't have strong opinions. I see the problems with us trying to go. We could hire them. We could do some initial internal programming, and then they could do some studies, and then where are we? I don't know. So I'd like to hear other people's comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson?
Aye. On this one, my personal, I've been an advocate to move this process along as quickly as possible with the hopes that we would be able to start working on it in September of 2021. And my concern is if we don't keep planning and stop that we're going to miss a whole year with just a 2 or 3 or 4 month delay in the planning. So I think I'm with Commissioner Abbott in that let's spend the money on the planning and keep that moving and putting the thinking into it, and then don't pull the trigger until we're comfortable. And if we have to, if at the end of the day we're still unsure what's going to happen in the fall or whatever, then we just can't pull the trigger.
Yep. Okay. And I think also in individual conversations with Commissioner Murdoch, and that I alluded to in my earlier report, if there is funding in the form of a stimulus package from the federal government for infrastructure projects that are shovel ready, having plans further along puts us in a better position to possibly take the advantage of a program like that for the infrastructure for our community. We don't know yet what that is going to look like, whether we'll even be eligible, if this is the kind of project they're talking about. But if you're not ready, and you are eligible, you can't take advantage of it. So I think I agree with the trying to move this forward, in a smart way, not just reckless, not spending the full dollar amount, but getting a team selected and having them work and plan kind of simultaneously along with the lakefront shoreline protection folks. Commissioner Murdoch, your hand is up.
Yeah, I agree with Gordon that I think that we want to go ahead and do the planning to keep the process moving forward. I think going back to Brian's comment, it's not going to be that full $300,000 that we're talking about spending. It's a fraction of that, but we should do the planning and then see where we are at when that's done, because that's going to be a decent lag time between here and further spending beyond the planning.
Okay, thank you. President Wolf.
I agree with most of the comments that have been said to this point. I think that we should keep moving forward with this while keeping a watchful eye of expenses being incurred and trying to keep them as low as possible so that we're not overdoing anything. And to your point, that we can be ready to go at a moment's notice if we do get some sort of government spending. Sorry, government funding, not spending. Perfect,
thank you. All right, moving past that, the sailing racks, small number. This is materials. The materials have largely been purchased already, so this really should be moved up from keep towards complete at this point. So I don't think there's really much to discuss here unless someone specifically has a question. Seeing none, moving on. Again, I won't go bore you for it, but this is material installation, the shoreline protection for Gilson and Langdon. Remember, we decided to put some money in the budget in the event that the study said there was something we could do in the short term to bolster what we have, knowing that there might be more that needs to be done in the long term. This obviously isn't going to get done until the planning is complete. So there's nothing that's going to be executed on this in the next month or even probably 3 months because there's a public meeting component of the shoreline planning. So I think this is one of those that we keep on our minds, but we're not actively executing in the near term. Any thoughts to the contrary on that? All right, moving down to tennis court resurfacing. Again, the courts are Gilson, Maple, and Thornwood Park. Superintendent Solberg went around to the parks at the beginning of her tenure with Jason Stanislaw from our tennis facility to look at the courts, look at their conditions. We do have cracking at many of these courts. if not all of them. And that's why we left them in there, because if and when we have an outdoor tennis season this year, we don't want there to be cracks, not just from a playability point of view, but also from people moving their feet across the top of them. We don't want there to be any potential trip hazards out there. So we left it in. Again, this is one of those things that you're not going to do dead in the middle of a tennis season. So if we want, we could execute on it right now in the short term, if the companies are able to mobilize and have it done, or it's probably wait until, you know, the later into the fall months to do it, but then you're pushing up against bad weather. So I'm curious what people's thoughts are on these. Commissioner Murdoch.
I went and I looked at all three today, and there is a large crack going the length of Thornwood, but it's right at the nets. It doesn't really affect the playability. Other than that, Thornwood and Gilson, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert, but I play a decent amount of tennis. I thought that we could certainly defer both of those. Maple's in bad shape. I'm not sure Maple's really playable the way it is with the cracking and whatnot. And so if we were going to do any, I think that that Maple is probably the one. But again, going back to Gordon's comment, I think we want to try to defer as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on that? All right, so we're going to hold those off for the very near term and reassess as time goes on and as the world becomes a little clearer to us. Parks Department ADA projects, those are ongoing at all times. For the last several years, we've been doing that throughout our facilities. I can tell you right now, with the level of staffing that we have and with the other needs that we have right now, while ADA improvements are always a top priority, none of this is happening in the very short term because our staff is stretched very thin over other needs at the moment. So I always want to keep ADA improvements within our budget and within our mission, but at this point, it's not going to be executed on in the next month or two. President Wolf, your hand's up.
There was one line item before this for the playground renovation at Maple.
Thank you. I
just
skipped around.
That one.
Okay, I'll go back to that next. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And Commissioner Murdoch, I'm assuming that's why you put your hand up as well?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so everyone's good with the ADA. Commissioner Abbott? Yep, thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Moving back to Maple Park playground renovation. This is a park that we've are a little bit behind. As you can see, 2015 would have been the normal replacement schedule. We did some planning at the end of last year in 2019. Had a couple public meetings at the park, some public input sessions with the neighbors, got various opinions on how to move forward. Since then, our Parks Department has removed a portion of the play structure due to rotting wood at the base of the swings. So we were in the position of having to either replace or take out completely. I told him at the time to just take it out completely because I was anticipating the overall playground renovation. I think at this point, my recommendation would be to defer the project and do the repair to get the swings back in service once the playgrounds are reopened by the governor's order, and just spend significantly less in 2019 or 2020 on this project. Commissioner Anderson, your hand was up.
Yeah, that was actually for the previous line item where we have tax supported funding for the ADA stuff in the other fund. So it's really, you know, if we had to spend money in ADA stuff, we have the money already for that from the tax revenues.
Correct. And as you help develop in the finance committee, we do an annual reconciliation of what we've taxed versus what we spent versus what we need to spend, so we can adjust future tax levies so we're not overtaxing. So anything that we don't get to this year is still work we need to do, but we don't need to re-tax for. So that money can flow to the fund balance at the end of the year, but then be paid for out of reserves in future years. All right. Any thoughts, any counter thoughts to Maple Park or ADA? Everyone's good with the approach? All right. Where should I go next? Thornwood Park Tennis, we've talked about. Wilmette Golf range nets. These are the nets along either side of the range. As we go through the winter months with ice and wind and snow and early spring rains, we tend to suffer varying levels of damage to those nets that need to be repaired. So we're catching the balls both from the range from going out into the course, but also preventing balls from the course into the range. So depending on where the tears and rips are located, it's a varying level of safety, which is why we left it in. But it's also one of those needs to be assessed and needs to be determined before we really execute on it. So it's not something we're doing next week by any means. So I would say keep it in there, monitor, look at it, evaluate, and then decide whether we execute on it somewhere down the road. All right. Then that brings us to the new category of possible items. These are all items that we aren't quite ready to say or weren't quite ready to say 3 weeks ago that we weren't going to do in 2020, but also knew that from a timing point of view, could be held off and looked at further down the road. And so none of these are pressing by any means. So if we want to just decide that we're not going to pursue any of them or leave them in possible status and talk about them in a month, that's fine by me. If there's any particular projects here that anyone wants to talk about, I'm more than happy to talk about them. I see one hand up, Commissioner Murdoch.
Yeah, you and I talked about the rooftop unit on the auditorium. What's the status on that? How much money are we spending repairing it to keep it going? Is it past its useful life? Can you give, you had indicated that you had some consistent problems with that.
Sure, yes. And I reached out to Superintendent Solberg, and the answer is we have a technician coming on site tomorrow to look at it, to give us an updated report on it. We have had some compressor issues that we've had to deal with. So it's possible that that's going to come tomorrow after a thorough examination, might become a little more critical for us than we initially thought when we did this list 3 weeks ago.
But if it turns out you have to replace a compressor for 10 grand, it's crazy not to replace the unit for 30.
Right, right.
Okay.
Commissioner Abbott?
2 items. Malincrot building automation, 18,000, not a big amount. When building automation systems go down, that can really send your systems haywire. You've got it here under possible, so maybe it's not so critical. If it was critical, I'd argue for it. But if you think it can be deferred, I'll defer to you. And Wilmette Golf drainage, $10,000 again, and not a big amount. Seems like it could be a big impact, but I'm not really all sure. Small amount of money, is it a big impact in terms of the golf courses? Plus, we could do it now, and and the grass could regrow. So those 2 are the only 2 that I saw that I could be talked into.
Yeah, as far as the building automation is concerned, there's definitely some benefit there, but right now we're operating without it to an extent. So that's fine. As far as the drainage on the golf course is concerned, we have been picking out trouble areas where water sits and we incur turf damage and fixing those as we go. A lot of that was going to be used in conjunction with the cart path project as well. But we definitely have seen some very good return on our efforts on the drainage work, especially within fairways that are super flat and in floodway areas. So similar to the conversation Commissioner Murdoch and I had earlier, he expressed the same thought that now might be the time to move those forward. Since there aren't golfers out there, it's a good time to dig that trench, put in that pipe, put in that gravel, and let the grass start growing when there isn't traffic going over the top of it.
I would agree. I'll leave it to your discretion.
Any other thoughts on the golf course drainage from anybody? Commissioner Anderson.
I would agree to go ahead with that one.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schisler?
I too would agree on that one.
All right, we will move that up into the keep. I believe I just counted to 4. All right, thank you. All right, any other projects in possible anyone wants to talk about in particular?
Yeah,
Commissioner
Steve, could you
Kistler?
speak to,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Goebel.
thank you. Could you speak to the two bigger ticket items? One is Howard Park parking lot pavement, and the next is K Nature pathways.
Sure. Howard Park is the parking lot on 17th Street, which is pretty well disintegrated on the top layer, and also has one of the steepest inclines from street into park, scrapes the bottom of most cars going in and out of there. So our plan was to replace that lot and level out that incline as best we could. And it's, again, one of those things that push come to shove, it doesn't have to happen, which is why we moved it into possible. As far as K Nature Center is concerned, that's paving the pathways around. It's been on our docket for a long time, but it can continue to be the gravel path that it is. It can continue to take water onto the path after rain events. But if we want to prioritize that as something we want to do, we could definitely try and execute on that as well.
Okay. Sorry.
Commissioner Murdoch?
I think Cecilia had her hand up first.
Commissioner Clark? She's
My-
on the
my-
third screen.
Yeah, yes, yeah. My sort of my question is on some of those possibles, you have them categorized as a non-critical item. That was back a decision, or that was some categorization that has been when we first were talking about these, that they're non-critical. So why are there non-critical items in the possible category? My question, because wouldn't those automatically be deferred if they're not critical?
For sure. And the short answer is a lot of staff has changed since the time we labeled these. So we're looking at them with new eyes and different people. And we didn't focus on that column at all as we did this process.
Okay.
Now, Commissioner Murdoch.
All right, thank you. Back to the two that Julia had asked about. First, with respect to K, I'd like to see that not as possible, but move down to deferred. I would like to see that not done this year. As you and I had talked when we went through the budget process, that, you know, Parks and Rec hasn't looked at this, hasn't talked about this. This was all done to a prior group, and none of the three of us were on the committee. I think realistically, for us to sort of get that on the agenda, kind of get up to speed on what's been done in the past, it's not going to happen this year. So I think we shouldn't even consider that as possible. That should definitely be deferred for another year. And on 17th Street, I went over there today. I agree it's in bad condition. I agree one of the entrances is certainly very steep, but the other entrance is not.
Mhm.
And it's a ton of money. And if we can, I guess my question is, who uses that park? It's mostly the softball players. We don't have football over there anymore. Who's using that parking?
Correct. We do not use it for football anymore, but we do have the Wilmette Wings utilizing it. That's one of the fields that we put them at. So I couldn't tell you how many people are pulling up to that parking lot versus the one located on Ridge between the atrium and St. Joe's. But you know, we do have plenty of activity in Howard Park between the adult recreational leagues as well as the wings. And I believe the Catholic Football League's also using that now. It's not our program, but they pay for field space over there at the park as well.
You know, it's in bad shape, and we certainly, you know, like to hold ourselves to a higher standard, but Gilson roads are a heck of a lot worse than that parking lot. Going back to Gordon's comment, it's a big number. I'd love to see that deferred.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to echo Commissioner Murdoch. That is a neighborhood park near where we are, and if there is traffic on a softball night or on a, you know, any number of practice nights, it's a small enough parking lot that the majority of the visitors will park on the streets. And as far as, you know, children's practices are concerned, I know within a certain age range, kids are biking as well. So if this is, you know, these are different days, these are harder times, I would agree with Commissioner Murdoch that this could be deferred.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Schisler?
I agree on both of those to defer them.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, any other items within possible that anyone is looking to discuss further or leave? Otherwise, I'll leave everything as possible for now. All right, jumping down to our final group of projects that we identified at the outset of our closure to be deferred out of 2020 altogether. Similar to the possible category. Anyone want to discuss any of these projects as possibly undeferring them, if that's a word? Commissioner Schisler?
Are there any that you would undefer?
Well, I don't have a strong opinion, but I know that I've spoken with all three members of the golf committee who called me separately today to ask about the golf cart path project. And really because it's a potential revenue generator as far as greens fees and carts in and around rain events, that maybe that it would be wise to pursue that project still, to not forego the revenue, similar to the point Commissioner Clark was making earlier about the cost of LED lights versus non-LED lights in the Centennial parking lot. And where I have a hard time with that one is kind of in line with Commissioner Anderson's thought process. This is a bigger number and it's something new. And yes, we do have a revenue generation component here, but when we're trying to balance everything we're balancing, moving a big number makes the balancing that much easier. So that was the thought process at the time when we marked it as deferred.
So perhaps we should still consider, just like with the Gilson thing, the planning and still move forward with some of it and perhaps decide whether or not to pull the trigger at a later time.
Correct. And as I said in my initial report, we are moving forward on the planning and the engineering, and the time frame for this project was always October. So we are, you know, a month or two away from being in any position to put together bid documents and actually start this process officially, moving towards construction. So we can revisit this one at the next time we talk.
So put that in the possible or the keep category to revisit.
I have several other hands up, so we'll find out.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, I guess I am wondering in a sense why for community play fields, bathrooms is put in the deferred, especially since that is potentially a village expense, not ours, or why is that?
Sure, and that's exactly why it's moved to deferred. In reality, it should be taken out of there completely because we now have approved intergovernmental agreements that say if the board decides to move forward with those bathrooms, they're going to be paid for by the village. So as far as our individual budget is concerned, it's really a non-issue. It should be eliminated altogether.
Okay, yep.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too caught up between the difference between deferred and possible, and even the items in keep that are deferred at least a month, because at the end of the day, they're all deferred until the next time we talk and go through the same process. I only had one question on this. All the security cameras, I've always had this fear, for example, the lakefront, somebody's gonna start spray painting the lakefront, you know, at the beach house and stuff. Has there been any kind of uptick or any vandalism that we should be trying to keep an eye on with the security cameras, or are we okay?
We're okay. We had one incident of vandalism shortly after the new beach house was built. We were able to get it removed successfully. And as far as I know, there hasn't been anything significant enough for me to find out about it. So I think we're doing okay.
Okay, great.
Commissioner Murdoch, I think I saw your hand up next.
Yeah, and back to the cart path. So I want to make sure I understand what you had said, that you're still doing everything that you would have been doing if we were pursuing the project between now and our meeting next month. We're at least a month away from bid documents. And so that project it's not really costing us much money. to continue that process. We're doing that now, and then we can revisit that in either the next meeting or the meeting after. Realistically, when is our drop dead date on making a decision on that particular project? Obviously, it's a huge project. It's a big number.
Yeah, I would say our drop dead date is somewhere in the mid to late June. That puts some pressure on the bid process and that sort of thing, but it can be done that quickly.
And the other piece, and there's no relation between what I'm about to say and that $850,000 number, but just doing a quick back of the envelope calculation of some of the numbers in both possible and keep. Yeah, I keep, 30,000, half of the computer, hardware and software, the lakefront planning that, we're going to do $100,000, but we probably won't spend the other 200,000. Deferring the playground at Maple, that's almost $500,000. And then a number of the possibles, a number of those items that we said that we will probably defer to another year, like the K Nature Park, and a number of other items we didn't discuss is another 350-ish. I think there's about $850,000 that should probably go back into your other spreadsheet, because I think you had just pulled the deferred number before. Now, I'm not suggesting we don't do those things and we do the cart pass at this point. I'm just saying that I think you want to try to pull that other 850 back into your model in terms of how we're forecasting at some point.
For sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark?
I guess I'm going back to the security cameras as well, with mostly for the sailing beach, because I recall that we had a number of people coming to some of our committee meetings with concerns about how the of people coming onto the sailing beach and potentially causing damage to equipment that was stored there. So I don't know if that's something that we should, consider or move on.
So I'll comment on the input we were receiving at the lakefront committees, and then I'm going to look to Superintendent Gwynn to see if she had any level of detail to tell me whether cameras were intended specifically for Sailing Beach. The feedback we were getting was around a lack of a gate to cut off the access of taking boats out of there and on a trailer and stealing boats. And we put in a gate that kind of addressed those concerns. And we have not heard further input from anyone. And again, it's been the off season. We haven't had any further input from anyone saying that they specifically wanted cameras down there. It was really about the gate, the feedback. And then Emily, I don't know if you have in your plans, if your plans progressed far enough for you to be able to say yes or no that we specifically had a camera, 4 cameras, or any cameras slated for the Sailing Beach or not. Can you enlighten me?
The exact quantity, I do have it. I believe it's more in like the 3 to 4 range for the sailing side. And it's, to be clear, a little bit more on just like the access points. It wouldn't cover all the rows of boats or anything further north where it gets a little bit more tricky to get power and all of that, the coax and everything else. So it's more located centrally on the entrance, some key focal points for staff and patron safety and security, not all of the boating area.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Schisler.
I think that we should perhaps take the security thing, and I actually think that's something that we could do now. It's also something that we could quite honestly use, especially at Gilson, for social distancing and to see what's going on, what the crowd levels are, this type of thing that would help with that as well. But I think that, for all of our facilities, and I've said that before, it's one bad incident in a way of, gosh, I wish we had security cameras there.
All right, thank you. So as far as security cameras are concerned, I will move them back into possible, but kind of similar to what Commissioner Anderson said, you know, all these items are effectively deferred at least until our next conversation. All right, President Wolf, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
That's okay. I wanted to go back to the cart path. Given that it's such a large amount, I know that we have a plan in place to recoup those funds over the years. I would like to see possibly if we can still move forward with our planning, but defer any costs of doing any construction until to a later date.
Yeah, for sure. If we decide at some point after doing all the planning that we still don't want to do it this year, that planning isn't lost for future years. So
Okay.
that we have pretty good amount of flexibility on that.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so with all that being said, we've now run through all the projects. I think we have pretty good direction on how to manage that. I think I would like to turn it over to President Wolf to guide the rest of the conversation.
So given that we just went through everything, I think we've given Steve and the staff some good input on what needs or what we'd like to see done with the capital projects, and we'll be revisiting these monthly, I would think, for the next few months until we kind of have a better sense of where we stand financially. So I just want to make sure everybody's good with that. If not, raise your hand now. Oh, wait, Steve, wait, hold on a second.
What do we do?
I'm muted now. Okay, Commissioner Abbott. Amy, you're gonna have to unmute Brian.
Hello. Oh, here we go. Yeah, look, I know everybody else has weighed in. I'm the same way with the cameras. And in fact, if there's an advantage to be taken by going ahead and moving it forward with these cameras, because everything's shut down, and we can gain some advantage by there's not a lot of money in these things. So I don't really know the details, but if there's an advantage, I could see moving ahead with that without waiting a month or two. But I leave that to staff. So I'm with others. The security cameras stuck out for me as something that was worthy. That's all.
President Wolf, I think you're muted.
Commissioner Murdoch.
I just want to know if we should wish Brian a happy birthday. I saw the balloons in the background.
I don't know. Let's see. Brian, is it your birthday?
No, it's my son's birthday. Everybody in my house gets a balloon on their birthday.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, Commissioner Schischler.
I actually agree with Commissioner Abbott that perhaps there might be some advantages in doing the security cameras while things are shut down.
Okay. Hold on a second. Steve, oh gosh, sorry.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. They keep moving as I try to unmute them. Anyway, how does staff feel about that? I don't know if that's something you guys have thought about. Would it make it easier to monitor parks and facilities if we had cameras sooner rather than later?
Yeah, obviously it does make monitoring easier. So we'll get together and we'll look at all the other things we're trying to do on reduced staff and see if we have the capacity to do it, and we'll let you know.
Great. Okay, any other comments on the capital projects? Let's see, Commissioner Schischler.
No, that was, you already
Oh,
called.
that's from before.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. And let's see, Commissioner Anderson.
With regards to the security cameras, it would be helpful to sort of know what we're really covering with them. It's not like it's going to be all seeing everywhere around the entire beach or the Gilson Park or whatever. We have, I mean, they're in very specific places and will have probably somewhat limited uses in many cases. So I just want expectations of what you get from the security cameras to be known before we all say we should go do them right now.
Sure, agreed. And the reality is, Superintendent Gwynn has really put in most of the legwork on this. So she would probably be best able to answer that question in generalities without having a specific plan in place. So I will let her do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The intent of the cameras for a good portion of the facilities is to replace the existing ones. We, for interior, this would be the first time that we're exploring any exterior cameras outside of maybe an entrance that catches a parking lot spot or two, right? They're not intended for exterior. So this is the first time we'd be really mapping that. So it's new territory for everyone. As soon as if that's greenlit, I would absolutely be able to circle back and give you kind of some parameters. Gordon, I think you're pretty spot on. You know, security cameras, they only cover so much. So, you know, we can do the best we can with wide angles and things along those lines to capture what we're hoping to. But again, it's for like staff and patron safety, you know, entrances, exits. But again, the exact locations, we can circle back before any purchasing or any next step happens.
Thanks. Anything else? Okay. I think we're kind of at the end of our meeting now. Our last item is adjournment. So I'm going to unmute everybody. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for doing this virtual meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thanks for setting this up.
Okay.
It worked pretty well.